Adelaide sat stiff as a board at her new seat. By now, the mockery of her schoolmates had long been replaced with the sound of their conversations. She glanced over at Beatrice, who was now petting some invisible something in her hand. On the other side of the room, Maggie tipped back in her chair, scowling more than ever, looking exactly like someone who'd throw a person through a window. "I am not like them. I'm normal. They are the scary ones." Beatrice looked over at her and offered a tiny wave, but Adelaide ignored it. She had enough trouble on her own. If anyone thought she was friends with the other two, all hope of relief from the constant ridicule would be lost. Then she heard it. The doorbell. Nobody else seemed to notice it, but new librarians didn't mean to her schoolmates what they meant to her. She saw a maid scurry over to Mrs. Merriweather, who nodded and rushed out of the room. Adelaide strained to hear, pushing back the curtain of sounds created by her schoolmates as they crunched their toast and talked and talked and talked. If she concentrated, she could hear the staccato clip of Mrs. Merriweather's steps as she rushed from the dining hall to the main hall with its tall pillars and portraits of dead people. She heard the maid's hurried breathing as she raced ahead to the foyer to open the heavy doors. She heard Mrs. Merriweather's taffeta skirts brush past the pedestal that held a buste of Madame Gertrude. And then...
"Miss Pete? Miss Delia Pete?"
"Please, call me Delia."
At least she's not old and creepy. But then again, it was often the younger ones who were the meanest.
"That sort of familiarity is for the students, Miss Pete. I am Miriam Merriweather, and you are very late."
"Oh, I'm sorry. I'm afraid the driver never arrived, and I couldn't get anyone else to stop for me. Perhaps your driver misunderstood. Is there another station?"
"The driver never... Oh dear, I shall have a word with Elmer Whitley when I see him next. Do come in. The girls are nearly through with their breakfast, which leaves me very little time to orient you."
Adelaide took a few deep breaths and told herself that she had been through this before and could handle it again. But the pounding in her chest only worsened when Mrs. Merriweather returned to the dining hall with her guest following closely. The new librarian was petite, pretty, and neatly dressed in a brown wool coat and little round glasses. Her auburn hair was pinned back in a bun and decorated with a single monarch butterfly pin. She had a kind look to her face, but Adelaide had long learned that librarians, like books, could not be judged by their covers.
"Ladies, I would like you all to meet your new librarian. You may call her Miss Delia."
Adelaide froze. Maggie rolled her eyes. Beatrice tucked her invisible pet safely in her pocket. The other students turned in unison, a sea of grey cotton jumpers and white blouses.
"Good morning, Miss Delia."
Miss Delia waved to them, and with a nose as sensitive as her ears, Adelaide caught a whiff of orange-scented hand cream.
"Thank you, ladies. You may finish your breakfast."
Mrs. Merriweather turned to Miss Delia and went on to talk of the endless achievements of other students.
"That is Maria Flores. She earned perfect marks in penmanship last year. I expect she'll have an excellent future in dictation. That's Becky Bushard. She's the pride and joy of our school, Miss Pete, and just yesterday she won the lead part in our annual play. Now, Christine Park."
"Excuse me, Mrs. Merriweather. What about those three?"
No. Please don't look at me, I'm not here." But it was too late for Adelaide's plea. The new librarian was staring right at her.
"Pardon?"
"The three girls seated away from the others. I couldn't help noticing that they don't look well. I know of a lovely tea that would put the color back in their cheeks if it's a cold."
Miss Delia's voice trailed off. Mrs. Merriweather's lips tightened.
"They're well enough, Miss Pete. I should tell you now that any attempt to impress me beyond hard work will fall flat in this school."
"Oh, I didn't mean..."
"But it was good of you to point them out, as you will need the advance warning."
Here the headmistress lowered her voice, though Adelaide could hear her all the same. She almost wished she couldn't.
"Those three, Miss Pete, are my trio of trouble. This is why I have seated them away from their peers. They are a constant source of grief for me, and no wonder. Their families arrived in Widowsbury after the big storm."
"The big storm?"
"Yes, the one with the untamed curls is Maggie Borland. She's 12, and a more slovenly, ill-tempered child you will never meet. Her parents ran off to join a circus or some nonsense. At least we're rid of them for the semester. The little one on the other side, that's Beatrice Alfred. Comes from a family of celebrity morticians, embalmers to the stars, they call themselves. Good heavens, what a relief it was when they took to travelling for their work, though it is far too late for their influence to be reversed. Beatrice is an exceedingly bright child. In fact, she is 2 years ahead of the other girls her age. But she has filled her head with such morbid fascinations that there is little room for more. Her spelling, mercy, her spelling. We have tried to correct her, but I fear she's simply too disturbed.
Disturbed? How do you mean?
She has a preoccupation with dead animals, Miss Pete, and she has been known to keep them as pets. She says their spirits are her friends.
How very sad. But it's kind of sweet in a way, don't you think? What about the one with the braids? My, what big eyes she has.
Adelaide quickly pretended to examine something on her plate.
That is Adelaide Foss. She's 11. Wretched girl, it must be said. I have serious concerns about her ability to conform, Miss Pete. Serious concerns.
Mrs. Merriweather leaned closer to the young librarian.
She claims she hears things nobody else ever hears. And did you know that there are some who say her parents are werewolves? Oh, they claim they are doctors researching medicine abroad, but it sounds highly suspicious to me.
Werewolves? Forgive me, but I don't think I believe in that.
I would doubt it too, had I not seen all that I've seen over the years. Now, I think I would believe almost anything. Nevertheless, you will have to become more acquainted with those girls than you'll care to, until they learn to behave like the others. They will spend every single recess of their school career in detention.
Goodness me.
And detention is always in the library.
Adelaide's blood went cold at the mention of that terrible place. Please let this librarian be nice. Please, please, please let her understand.
Yes, they are a trying group. Therefore, anything you feel must be done to maintain discipline. You have my permission to try anything.
Mrs. Merriweather led the new librarian from the dining hall, talking of boring things like rules and wages and where the washrooms were. Adelaide stopped listening. It hardly mattered what they said now. The prospect of renewed library time was enough to ruin her entire morning. More than her mornings were usually ruined. Even so, she was determined more than ever to avoid winding up in detention yet again. There had to be a way. I am not a scary child. I'm completely normal, and no matter what, I will only do normal things today. She repeated this to herself throughout the morning, desperately hoping that if she could just avoid notice, she might escape the misfortune that followed her most other days, despite her best efforts. By lunchtime she began to think she had succeeded. For recess would be next, and no one had yet mentioned detention. Perhaps this Miss Delia was still becoming acquainted, and there would be no library time today. Or maybe Adelaide would be assigned a few janitorial tasks, just as she had been since the last librarian's hasty retreat. She was thinking of all this while searching for a seat in the dining hall when a sudden impact to her left side sent her lunch tray flying. Mashed potatoes somersaulted through the air. Peas scattered about the floor like marbles. The dining hall felt so quiet one could have heard a pin drop or, in this case, the sticky plop of Salisbury steak as it slid from the front of Adelaide's jumper to the marble floor. Before her stood none other than Becky Bushard, a smirk of satisfaction creeping across her lips.
I'm sorry. I didn't recognize you without fur all over your face.
Becky's blonde ponytail bobbed like a snake hanging from a tall, skinny tree. The other students went back to their lunches. To them, it was just another day. I am not a werewolf. Becky cupped a hand to her ear and bent down.
Excuse me? Could you say that in English, please? I don't speak dog.
I'm not a dog. Adelaide's fists clenched, but Becky was already laughing and walked away.
Did you see how red she was?
Adelaide was about to storm after her when suddenly, out of nowhere, something came soaring through the air at impossible speed. All eyes turned to the brown blur, mouths forming an O as it streaked towards its target, striking Becky's head with a delicious smack. It was a Salisbury steak. the force of which was so great it knocked Becky right off her feet. Whoa! Adelaide looked down at her hands. Had she done that? The dining hall was still again. A fork clattered to the floor. Becky's mouth dropped open as she searched for words, at last issuing a shriek so loud and pitiful it sounded animal. Chaos took over as Becky's dutiful followers rushed to her aid. Adelaide searched the floor in bewilderment. Her own lunch still lay in a puddle at her feet. But if she didn't throw the steak, who did? She scanned the crowd for an answer. In the very back stood the scowling Maggie Borland, wiping her soiled hands on her wrinkled jumper. Adelaide wanted to thank her, but then Miss Patricia, large and square like an icebox, charged to the center of the dining hall and blew her whistle. Miss Patricia was in charge of the 11th and 12th storm, gym class, and enforcement of all rules. And she rarely said anything without including the whistle.
Maggie Borland and Adelaide Voss!
Adelaide didn't even have to hear the rest.